Wall Street opened in the red. Investors are reacting to the gloomy rhetoric of the Fed's leader and stoking fears about the second wave of the pandemic. The truculent stance of Donald Trump adds to pessimism among investors. The US dollar benefits from its safe haven status. The highlight of the week is data on the US labor market, which has been logging a severe downturn. Yesterday, the Federal Reserve dampened investors' confidence and optimism, which were triggered by reopening of the U.S. economy and a decline in the pandemic rates. However, the hopes were wrecked by the actual state of affairs in the U.S. economy. Jerome Powell sent a clear message that the exit from the crisis would be painful and protracted. His speech has not sparked off any panic yet, but the market reversed downwards. Today, global stocks are extending weakness. Judging by the downtrend on Wall Street, investors are worried by the bleak prospects of the US economy. Besides, Donald Trump forgets ahead with the punitive measures against China. Futures on the Dow Jones shed 1.7% in the early New York trade to trade at 22,830. The S&P 500 also lost over 1%. Jerome Powell caused sell-offs of risky assets. The US dollar index again climbed above the psychological level of 100 points thanks to its safe haven status. Today, the greenback is carrying on with an advance across the board. Its index opened the New York trade at near 100.60. The US currency also found support from escalating trade tensions between the United States and China. Traders fear that anti-China rhetoric of the White House could be the reason for introducing new import tariffs, casting a shadow over the global economy. In this context, investors will shift focus towards the US dollar as a shelter amid global uncertainty. Importantly, there are two factors that could pose a challenge to the US dollar. In view of a protracted recovery in the US economy from the pandemic, Congress is recommended to adopt a new stimulus package. It means that the US Fed will go on pumping up the money aggregate that is bearish to the US dollar. This is the first factor. And the second one is that the US banks encountered problems with the dollar liquidity. Now this issue has been settled. However, this is another headwind for the US dollar. Today, traders are evaluating a weekly update on initial jobless claims in the United States. The number of first-time applications for unemployment benefits increased by 2,981,000 last week. That is 195,000 down from the previous week. Experts had assumed 2.5 million claims. Judging by the figures, Americans go back to work after lockdown. A weekly change is a few times lower than historic highs recorded in April. However, huge numbers are still worrisome. The US dollar is holding the upper hand over its Canadian counterpart. Today, the USDХ pair rose above the level of 1.41. Meanwhile, oil prices accelerated growth in the evening amid cautiously optimistic tone of the International Energy Agency. It softened its assessment of imbalance between supply and demand. The agency revised the forecast of global energy demand. It's expected to fall 8.6% this year on average. That is much less than in the previous forecast. WTI futures gained 4.6% to trade at $26.46 a barrel. Thus, WTI price grew to a 5-week high. In fact, energy investors take a long-term forecast with a pinch of salt. Indeed, every think tank or agency has its own viewpoint on the same thing. At present, no one is able to present an accurate forecast because no one knows when the recession reaches its bottom. It would be a good idea to figure out how much forecasts differ for the second half of the year. That's all for today. We wish you profitable deals. See you on our channel tomorrow.